So we're continuing with the discussion of the Heart Sutra and the teachings of the Great Way. And it would help as a lightning review to just go back and, over and over, we've had this metaphor in community refuge that the way things are, it's more like a river than a rock. It's moment by moment by moment experience going by. That's what we're experiencing, our awareness and whatever's happening, and then the next moment of experience and awareness and so forth. And the illusion of a solid me gets constructed out of that. And so it feels more like a rock, but in truth, it's just flowing by moment by moment, more like a river than a rock. The Heart Sutra takes those teachings from the foundation of Buddhism and expands them. And so we began this series of discussions with the observation that, whatever you're experiencing, it feels very compelling. It does to me. I mean, this feels like my life. I feel like I'm looking at you. At least I'm looking at you on my computer screen. I have this whole world that's around me. I have this beautiful painting behind me. It's very compelling. It feels real. And yet, none of it, me, the computer that I'm looking at, you on the other side of this conversation, the painting behind me, none of it will last forever. It's all a temporary experience that's happening and with awareness, and then the next moment, and then the next moment. And so the experience might be very vivid and compelling, but it's not real in any permanent sense. That's the core insight of this. And so we've looked at, how ego arises, how that holding onto the rock arises as first the experience of separateness, and then we have a feeling reaction or a gut reaction, and then we give it a name, and then we tell a story about it, and then the storyteller feels real, and we think that storyteller is me. And those are the five skandhas: form, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness. We just called them separateness, reactivity, naming, story, and storyteller. And then we forget that we made all that up, and we're in this illusion that, this is all happening to me. Of course I'm real. And the Heart Sutra is saying over and over again, not so real. Compelling, catches your heart, captures your attention, but not a permanent, solid, forever thing. And so last week we looked at the line uh, of no birth and no cessation, and the idea that there's a me. Well, if it's real, it had to have a moment where it was born. But if you look, there's nothing solid there to be born, right? It's just this temporary illusion that's happening over and over. So if it isn't born, if it's not real, well, then it can't end. It has to have a start to have a finish. No birth, no cessation. So we're going to take a step further to no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering. And the question we began this presentation with today was, I invited you to think of something that made you sad that isn't real, or that makes you angry that isn't real. And it's a difficult question because as soon as it makes us sad, we think it's real. So I talked about my favorite story and how the tragic love story of that, it's a story. It's completely made up. A couple of others talked about songs, a particular song or a particular song phrase that when you hear it, it evokes sadness. Is the sadness about any true event? Not particularly. It's a made up thing. Um, or we make up expectations about projects, and we think, oh, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, and then whatever it is that we have as a list in our head of things to accomplish, projects to do, tasks to master, and it doesn't happen, and we're sad about these things that haven't happened, and we made it all up, right? There's a lot of happiness to be gained by just letting go of the list, right? Or the whole political situation. This is not to deny that as citizens, we have roles to play of interest and being informed. That's what keeps a democracy strong. But a lot of the drama that happens is just this made up shadow show. to capture your attention and monopolize your interest and steer you in a particular way. It's not real, whatever side you're on, right? Both of them are not real. I love the one feeling incapable of doing something, right? Even though you have a heart's desire, but there's this story of, right? Um, Imagine disappointments of children. It's like, oh, they must be so disappointed in me, and you don't know, but you're carrying the story with you, and the story evokes sadness, right? Or the anticipated, someone's dying, and you're anticipating their death, and then you're feeling sad ahead of time before it's happened. There's a Roman philosopher who I think it was Cato. I think it was Cato. If I'm wrong, I don't know. Cato the younger, who said that's like borrowing misery from the future. But we do that. We sort of anticipate, oh, that'll really make me sad, and then we start practicing being sad. Right? The idea behind no suffering, no origin of suffering is, if the ego is not real, if it's more like a river, moment, experience and awareness, experience and awareness, experience and awareness, there's no rock. The rock is an illusion. If the rock isn't real, where is the suffering going to stick? Who is it that's suffering? It's just this moment, and then the next moment, and then the next moment. But we take a moments of sadness, experiences of sadness, and sadness can be real, right? Or loss, or grief, or loneliness, or heartbreak, any of that, right? It can be real in the sense that you're having the vivid experience, and yet it's not a solid, permanent thing. And we take that temporary experience and make it into an identity. If I could say it in a very short way, we believe in our sadness, or our anger, or our hurt memories, or fill in the blank, and we create our own suffering. Now let's take a pause. The first truth that the Buddha taught after he awoke, and he did tell somebody, this is, I've discovered awake mind, and the person didn't get it, so he's well, let's start at the beginning. Life is a rough ride. Dukkha, the Sanskrit word for dukkha. Life is rough. It has ups and downs. It has disappointments and setbacks and happiness, which sets you up for the next round. Right? So that's often translated as life is suffering. And it could seem like this is contradicting life is suffering. But if you understand the first teaching is life's a rough ride, that's true. Turning that into me suffering, the rock is suffering, that's a choice. Are you going to remember that it's moment by moment by moment, the river going by? Or are you going to hold on to your pet rock and its story of suffering? If the rock isn't real, which is what the Heart Sutra is inviting you to consider, it's vivid, it's compelling, you really do feel that. You have hurt feelings, you feel rejected, spurned, lonely, you're in grief. It's all very vivid. But is it a rock? Because if it's not a rock, then the suffering doesn't have any place to start. If it doesn't have a place to start, it has no place to stop. It's just that moment by moment experience over and over and over. The Heart Sutra is a call to bravery. It invites you into this flow, right, of dynamic, awake, alive, open-heartedness, without holding on and solidifying your territory as that's me, that's my suffering, those are my loves, that's my accomplishment. No rock, just flow. No suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering. Of course, if you've made a project out of getting your suffering to stop, and you've made a career out of being the person who could quell suffering, this is really threatening. But if you're interested in waking up and just living an ordinary human life that's awake and open-hearted, well, then this is an open door to bravery and good heartedness. So, with that, I'm going to pause the talk and I'd love to know what you think.